The beachside villa my parents bought for me had somehow become a gift, one that my husband handed over to his secretary. Julia Blake proudly posted a 9-photo collage of a poolside party on her social media, tagging the location with a cheerful caption, "Thank you to our amazing CEO for gifting me this luxurious villa. I promise I will work even harder." The photos the housekeeper sent me were worse. The garden sculptures were smashed to pieces. The flowers I had personally planted were torn out without a trace. I forwarded the pictures to Gavin Porter, adding a simple question: "What is the meaning of this, Mr. Porter? Why is someone else living in my villa?" He responded almost immediately with a voice message. The sound of waves crashed in the background. "Do not be so petty. It is not like we are short on places to stay." I sent one last message: "You have 3 hours. I want her gone, and I want the villa restored to how it was." Gavin read it, but never replied. 5 minutes later, I sold the villa for $1, and then I destroyed his precious antique collection, smashing each piece until nothing but shards remained. If someone chooses not to listen, then I have no problem teaching them a lesson they will not forget. As I set my phone down, it rang. The name flashing on the screen was Gavin, the same man who had ignored me earlier. "Ruby West, what did you do?" His voice was filled with fury. "Why was Julia thrown out by security?" I answered calmly, "That villa is mine. I just sold it." The new owner had only one condition: clear out all people and belongings within the hour. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. "Ruby, I think there has been a misunderstanding," Gavin said, his tone softer now. "Nothing is going on between me and Julia. She is just my secretary." He hesitated before continuing, "You are overreacting. Do you not think you are being a bit too harsh and sensitive?" I let out a soft laugh. "Gavin, it is not me who crossed the line. It is you who lacks boundaries and self-respect, and now you have the nerve to blame me." He did not respond to that. Instead, he tried to change the subject. "Ruby, you have several villas sitting idle. Letting Julia use one was just practical. Nothing inappropriate happened, I promise." After a pause, his tone shifted, tinged with annoyance. "You really should not be so stingy." I smiled faintly, though my eyes had gone cold. "Well, since you are so generous, I assume you will not mind your precious antiques turning into trash." With that, I opened my photo album and sent him a few pictures. In them, his cherished antique collection lay in ruins. Broken porcelain and shattered wood littered the floor. The silence on the line stretched long. Finally, he spoke, slowly and deliberately, "Ruby West." When he called me by my full name like that, it meant he was seething with anger. But I did not care. "Gavin," I said coolly, "I hope the photos came through clearly. This is what happens when you try to test my limits. If you ever pull something like this again, what you lose will be far more valuable than a few broken trinkets." I ended the call without waiting for a reply. In all the years since our marriage, Gavin and I had rarely fought this fiercely. But that did not mean I was afraid of conflict. I simply chose my battles carefully. What I would never do, however, was back down when my boundaries were crossed. The moment you start compromising on your limits in a marriage, you are simply inviting the other person to keep pushing further. Besides, our union was never about love in the first place. The Porter family had been eager to enter the inner circle of high society. They needed the influence and backing of the West family. That was how this so-called marriage came to be, a calculated alliance between two powerful houses. When I first met Gavin, he was attentive and gentle. His handsome face and calm demeanor made him appear trustworthy, capable, and refined. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, it would not be so bad to build a life with someone like him. So I did not resist the family's arrangement. To our surprise, affection did blossom between us. We even had a few blissful years. Often praised by others as the perfect couple, a match of beauty and brains, but no matter the stage of our relationship, I always knew one thing with absolute clarity: I had to put myself first. Eventually, the passion faded, and life returned to routine. I accepted that. Most love stories fade with time. And I was not immune to that reality. But what I could never accept was a third party being the reason for that fading. Since I was a child, I have hated one thing above all else: people touching what belongs to me. If something I own becomes dirty, I throw it away without hesitation. If a person becomes tainted, I deal with them the same way. Gavin had not contacted me since. That was always his way. The moment he was confronted with the truth, he chose silence as his shield, pretending that if he said nothing, the damage would somehow undo itself. Until this afternoon, when a message from Vivi popped up on my phone. Ruby, why are you ignoring me? I just saw you inside the venue. I called out to you forever, but you didn't even turn around. I frowned slightly and replied quickly, I did not go out today. You must have mistaken someone else for me. Are you sure it wasn't you? I saw that royal blue mermaid gown you had custom made. And you were with President Porter. Then came another message from Vivi. Wait, I got a photo. Front view. My phone buzzed again, and this time an image appeared. Gavin stood tall in a perfectly tailored black suit, looking polished and composed. Next to him, Julia wore my custom gown, smiling as she chatted with someone off camera. I stared at the photo for 10 full seconds, my hand frozen mid-air. Before I could gather my thoughts, another message arrived. This one from Gavin's executive assistant. It came with a screenshot. It was from Julia's social media page. First time attending the Cloud Summit auction. So grateful to President Porter for the opportunity to see how the upper class lives. Heart emoji. The photo showed her seated in the front row of the auction, with Gavin right beside her, a faint smile on his lips. It was clear he had allowed the photo, even approved of the post. A memory surged in my mind. Gavin hated being photographed. Even during the sweetest days of our relationship, he would frown and say no when I asked for a single couple's picture. And yet here he was, letting another woman sit beside him, wear my gown, and post their photo online for the world to see. Suddenly, I realized the punishment I gave him this morning had been far too soft. Not only had he brought another woman to the most elite social gathering of the season, but he had done so with quiet approval. He let her wear what was mine, and gave her the spotlight. Without hesitation, I forwarded the photo to Gavin. Explain this. Why is she wearing my dress? The message showed read, but no reply came. I waited for a few minutes, then sent him another photo. This time, one I had just taken. A moment later, Vivi messaged again. Ruby, what did you send President Porter? He suddenly stood up and rushed out of the hall. Julia tried to stop him, but he just pushed past her. I did not answer her. Gavin was already calling. In the photo I had sent him, I sat calmly in front of the fireplace, holding a small, finely crafted wooden box in my hands. Its surface gleamed, spotless, clearly well cared for. Gavin's voice trembled as it came through the phone, tinged with panic and anger. Ruby, put that down. What are you trying to do? I asked quietly. Inside the box were carefully preserved keepsakes, a few faded photographs, a delicate bracelet, and a jade pendant. The girl in the photos wore a radiant smile. She was Gavin's first love, the one his family had once mentioned in passing, the girl who had passed away from illness years ago. His white moonlight, as they called her, and now I finally understood all his strange behavior. Julia looked strikingly similar to her. Ruby, please do not touch those things, Gavin said again, this time almost pleading. Gavin, you know how much I hate people touching what belongs to me, I replied coldly. Just like how you are feeling now, here is what you are going to do. You are going to ask Julia to take off that dress. There is a lounge area at the auction venue. She can change there. There was silence on the line. Then Gavin finally spoke, his voice defensive. Ruby, you only wear those gowns once anyway. What harm does it do for her to wear one of them? I let out a soft laugh, though my tone had turned colder still. Gavin, even if I never wear it again, my things are mine. And no one else touches them without permission. You have two choices. Either you make sure Julia changes out of that dress before the auction begins, or, I gave the wooden box a slight shake. The soft clink of its contents echoed faintly through the phone. You face the consequences. With that, I hung up. Not long after, my phone lit up with message after message from Vivi. Ruby, what did you just say to him? Your Mr. Porter just stormed in looking like a ghost, didn't say a word, and dragged Julia right out. Wait a second. They are back. Oh my goodness. What is going on? Julia, she is wearing a janitor's uniform. I smiled faintly. The result was even better than I expected. Vivi kept sending updates. Ruby, the look on Julia's face. My word, it is priceless. Everyone is whispering and staring. I am getting second-hand embarrassment just watching. I replied quickly, Vivi, take a few pictures for me. She sent over several photos right away. In them, Gavin sat with a cold, unreadable expression. Beside him, Julia looked completely out of place, dressed in an ill-fitting grey uniform, her makeup smudged, her eyes red and puffy. Vivi messaged again, her tone full of mischief. This auction has strict rules. No one is allowed to leave halfway through. That girl is going to sit through the entire event in that outfit. She added, your Mr. Porter looks like he swallowed a bag of coal. His face is pitch black. Ruby, this move of yours, absolutely savage. Julia should have known better. Of all the people to mess with, she picked you. She probably still doesn't understand how badly she lost. After the auction ended, another message popped up. They are finally leaving. Your husband looks like he is about to faint from rage. Julia, she is crying so hard she can barely breathe. A new photo came in. The royal blue mermaid dress Julia had proudly flaunted online. It now lay crumpled in a trash can. Ruby, Vivi wrote, I got the shot. Without hesitation, I uploaded the photo to my social feed. My caption was simple, trash belongs in the trash. In less than 5 minutes, the post had over 100 likes. Anyone with a brain could recognize that the dress in the photo was the same one Julia had shown off in her carefully posed pictures. The meaning behind my post was clear. Ruby, Vivi messaged, Porter lost all dignity today. Are you sure he will not take it out on you when he gets home? I replied calmly, do not worry. Even if he had the nerve, he would not dare. Later that night, Gavin returned. He walked into the room with a storm cloud over his head and stopped in front of me. Ruby, where is it? He asked, his voice low and hoarse. I looked at him without speaking. He was trying his best to stay composed. Ruby, he said slowly, I admit my behavior today was inappropriate. I did not consider how it would make you feel. That was my fault, but I did what you asked. I embarrassed myself in front of everyone. Can we please stop this now? Just give me back my things. I raised an eyebrow. Gavin, what happened today? You brought that on yourself. Your actions caused your humiliation, not me. Are you really not going to explain anything? Gavin looked away, avoiding my eyes. She is just a junior employee. That is all. I was simply rewarding her for doing a good job. I let out a bitter laugh and stepped closer. Gavin, there are countless ways to reward someone. Why did you choose the most inappropriate one? A luxury villa, an exclusive auction, a designer gown worth a fortune. Do you not understand what those things symbolize to a girl like her? You refuse to take a single couple's photo with me, yet you are willing to pose for pictures with her. Every time you indulge her, you send her a message that she means something more. That is why she got so bold, even dared to challenge me. Tell me, does her barely passable work performance really deserve that kind of reward? Gavin remained silent. I looked him squarely in the eye. You favor her because she reminds you of your first love, don't you? I looked him in the eye and spoke plainly, cutting straight to the truth. A substitute is still just a substitute. No matter how much she resembles her, she can never be her. Gavin, you need to see that clearly. His breathing grew heavier, but he remained silent. I took a small wooden box from behind me and held it out to him, softening my tone. Gavin, I understand your attachment to her. I have never tried to erase the beauty of what you two shared, but I hope you will not destroy the beauty we have, either. What happened today, it can be the first time, but it must also be the last. Gavin accepted the wooden box and set it gently aside. Then, without a word, he pulled me tightly into his arms. Ruby, I am sorry, he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. I really know I was wrong. There is nothing between me and Julia, not anymore, I promise. I will keep my distance from now on. This will never happen again. Please, do not be angry anymore. All right. His voice trembled as he pleaded, arms wrapped firmly around my waist. I let out a quiet sigh, nodded, and returned his embrace. The next day, the incident at the auction, along with a not-so-subtle post I shared online, turned Julia into the company's laughingstock. Gavin's obvious shift in attitude, his deliberate avoidance of her, became a clear signal for everyone to follow. In a company like ours, filled with opportunists, it did not take long for the tides to turn. Colleagues who had flattered her endlessly just the day before now kept their distance. Some even took it a step further. Photos of Julia at the auction, wearing a janitor's uniform, were plastered across the company bulletin board. In the pictures, her eyes were swollen from crying, and she looked completely humiliated. People began pointing and whispering as they passed her in the halls. That is the shameless one, wearing the clothes the boss's wife threw away. Her days at the office grew increasingly unbearable. The lunchroom staff started tampering with her food. She would take one bite and suddenly turn pale. Once, while using the restroom, someone locked the door from the outside, trapping her inside for an entire afternoon. The most disturbing part, everyone pretended nothing had happened. She even called Gavin for help. He saw her name and immediately ended the call. I heard about all of this from my executive assistant, President West. She asked carefully, "Do you want me to step in and put a stop to it?" I shook my head calmly. Assistant Lee, do not overestimate my kindness, and do not underestimate her ambition. She made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences. A week later, my assistant informed me that Julia had not shown up to work for 3 days straight. I assumed she had finally reached her limit and planned to resign, but I was wrong. I had underestimated her once again. That day, Gavin was scheduled for a major business negotiation, a potential international partnership worth at least $100 million. Just 20 minutes before the meeting, his phone rang. It was Julia. Without hesitation, Gavin declined the call, but seconds later, a text came through. "President Porter, I am sorry to disturb you at the last moment. I had hoped to thank you in person, but it seems fate ends here. Thank you for your trust and support. Meeting you was the greatest fortune of my life. If there is a next life, I will repay your kindness then." Gavin's face went pale in an instant. He tried calling her back, but the line kept ringing with no answer. Panicked, he called for his assistant and asked them to locate Julia using her phone's GPS. "Postpone the meeting," he ordered abruptly. Without another word to Porter or anyone else, Gavin bolted out the door. When Gavin arrived at Julia's apartment, he found her unconscious in the bathtub. Blood flowed steadily from a deep cut on her left wrist, turning the water around her a dark, chilling red. Her face was as pale as snow, her breath faint and shallow. In a panic, Gavin scooped her up and raced to the hospital, holding her tightly the entire way. It was said that, during the drive, her body began to grow cold, and in that moment, Gavin was reminded, painfully, of the day his first love had died in his arms. Fortunately, they arrived in time. Julia was saved. Later, when Gavin learned how much bullying Julia had endured at work recently, he was consumed with rage. But at that time, I knew nothing of what had happened. That very morning, I had gone to the same hospital for a routine checkup. The doctor confirmed that I was 6 weeks pregnant. Overwhelmed with joy, I could not wait to share the news with Gavin. Just as I stepped into the hallway, I saw him coming out of the elevator, beaming. I hurried toward him, ready to tell him about our baby. Before I could say a word, Gavin raised his hand and struck me hard across the face. The force of the blow knocked me off balance, and I fell to the floor, my cheeks stung with pain. I sat there in stunned silence, unable to process what had just happened. In all our years of marriage, Gavin had never laid a hand on me. "Ruby," he shouted, his voice full of fury, "how could you be so cruel?" He stood above me, eyes filled with anger and disgust. "I did what you asked. I stayed away from Julia, but that was not enough for you, was it? You would not stop until you pushed her to the brink." I looked up at him, confused, my lips trembling. "She is in the hospital right now, fighting for her life, and you show up here smiling. Are you here to finish what you started? Why did I ever marry someone as heartless as you?" I gripped the pregnancy report tightly in my hand, trying to find the words to explain, but Gavin did not give me the chance. He turned and walked away without looking back. As I sat on the cold floor, his words echoed in my ears. From his reaction, I slowly pieced together what had happened. Julia had attempted suicide, and Gavin believed it was my fault. Shortly after, I received a call from the executive assistant. "Mrs. West," she said hesitantly. "I just wanted to say goodbye, Mr. Porter has dismissed me, accusing me of abusing my position. Blake will be replacing me." "What?" I gasped. "It is not just me. Everyone who has ever had a disagreement with Blake has been let go. Almost the entire department is gone." While I had been excitedly preparing for our child, Gavin had already made his decision. He chose Julia. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking with anger. Then I tore the pregnancy report into tiny pieces and let them fall to the floor. If this was the path Gavin had chosen, then he should not be surprised when I chose mine. I packed my things and returned to my parents' house. When my father saw me, he did not ask any questions. He simply told the housekeeper to prepare my old bedroom. But my mother noticed something was wrong. "Ruby," she said gently, sitting beside me on the bed, "did you and Gavin have a fight?" I shook my head and gave no answer. The bruise on my wrist, left from my fall at the hospital, had not yet faded. My mother's eyes caught sight of it. She reached out and held my arm, her brow furrowing. "What happened to your wrist?" she asked, her voice tight with worry. "It is nothing," I replied softly. "I just bumped into something." I did not tell them that Gavin had hit me. I did not mention Julia either. All I said was that I needed a few days to rest, to clear my mind. But my parents were not fools. With just a little investigation, they quickly learned the truth. For half a month, Gavin did not call, not even a single message. The cold silence between us slowly eroded the last traces of warmth in our marriage. Then, on social media, I began to see post after post from Julia. She flaunted photos of herself attending events with Gavin, every image carefully selected, as if she were rehearsing her debut as Mrs. Porter. "President Porter brought me to the International Business Summit today. So many people thought I was his wife. Thank you, President Porter, for the limited edition handbag. Only someone who truly understands me would know my taste so well. President Porter calls me his lucky star. Thanks to me, he closed another major deal today." Each caption was paired with a photo of her smiling intimately beside Gavin. She wanted me to see it. Every post was deliberate. I let out a quiet laugh and powered off my phone. She was just a late-season grasshopper. One last hop before the frost. 2 weeks later, as I had quietly arranged, a group of major shareholders led by my father began withdrawing their investments from the Porter family's company. The stock took a sharp nosedive and hit the limit down for several days in a row. On the third day of the crash, Gavin's parents arrived at our home. "Ruby, how have you been lately?" Gavin's mother asked gently, reaching for my hand with a look of concern. "I have been well," I replied with a calm smile as I poured tea for them. "So, why are you staying with your family all of a sudden?" "Gavin told us you were not feeling well. We have been worried," she said, trying to probe without pushing too hard. Gavin had not made a single call to me. But now he had sent his parents to do damage control. Before I could answer, my father's voice rang out, cold and steady. "My daughter is in perfect health. It is just her mood that has taken a hit lately." The Porters looked at each other, visibly unsettled. "What happened? Did Gavin upset Ruby?" Mr. Porter asked, frowning. My father gave a sharp laugh and set his teacup down with a loud thud. "The way your son behaves. Well, it certainly leaves an impression." Their faces fell. Then, with deliberate calm, my father recounted everything that had happened. How Gavin had allowed Julia to move into my beachside villa, how he had stood by and let her taunt me, how, at the hospital, he blamed me for everything without even asking what had really happened. "And your son," my father added, his voice steely, "has already fired every employee at the company who dared to cross that woman. That is how the heir of the Porter family treats the woman he calls his wife." Mr. and Mrs. Porter turned pale. Their expressions shifted from shock to shame, from disbelief to silent horror. This cannot be true," Gavin's mother whispered, looking at me in disbelief. "Gavin is not like that. He would never." "Facts speak for themselves," I said quietly. Mr. Porter, now trembling with anger, snatched up his phone and dialed Gavin's number. "You get over here right now," he shouted. "You ungrateful son. You have brought shame to this entire family." Without waiting for a reply, he hung up and turned to me and my father, bowing his head. "I am so sorry. We failed in raising our son. But I promise, Ruby, we will make this right." But what kind of apology could Gavin possibly offer? Would he lie and say that I meant more to him than Julia ever did, or would he tell the truth, that he had long regretted this marriage? Either way, I no longer cared. I rose without a word, returned to my room, and pulled out the divorce papers I had already prepared. It was time to end this farce. Once and for all. Not long after, the front doors opened and Gavin stepped inside. To my surprise, Julia followed closely behind him, clinging timidly to his back like a frightened child. Her face wore that same pitiful expression she always used so well. My parents, who had only just softened their stance after Mr. and Mrs. Porter came earlier to offer their apologies, instantly turned grim again. The tension in the room thickened. Gavin still had the nerve to bring her here, to our home. Foolish beyond saving. Mr. Porter stormed over and without a word, slapped Gavin hard across the face. You ungrateful son, how dare you bring this woman here? The sound echoed in the room. Gavin's cheek flushed red instantly. He stood frozen, clearly stunned that his father would strike him in front of everyone. Dad, please, let me explain. Explain what? Mr. Porter barked, landing another slap on the other cheek. You have shamed the entire Porter family. Gavin, humiliated in front of Julia, looked ready to argue, but before he could speak, Mr. Porter kicked at him with force. To everyone's shock, Julia threw herself in front of Gavin, taking the blow for him. She cried out in pain and collapsed to the floor, clutching her leg with a pale face as tears streamed down her cheeks. Mrs. Porter, watching Julia's performance, trembled with rage. You shameless girl, even now, you are still pretending to be the victim. She lunged forward, ready to strike Julia herself. But Gavin quickly shielded her in his arms. I watched the whole scene unfold like a perfectly staged drama. I could not help but chuckle, then gently clapped my hands. What a touching love story, I said with a smile. Gavin turned to glare at me, his face twisted with anger. Ruby, you venomous woman. Stop trying to slander me and Julia. There is nothing inappropriate between us. Our relationship is clean. He held Julia tightly, shielding her. I am only doing this to atone for how cruel you were before. The moment those words left his mouth, my father shot to his feet, his face burning with fury. My daughter, cruel. Another slap from Mr. Porter cracked across Gavin's face. Shut your mouth. One more word and I will break your legs. Then Mr. Porter turned to me, his expression softening, his voice lowered into a gentler tone. Ruby, we will make this right. I promise you a proper resolution. I rose from my seat, looking around the room before letting my gaze settle on Gavin. Since both families are here today, and everyone has seen the choices Gavin has made, there is no reason to continue this marriage. I took out the divorce papers I had prepared in advance. The agreement is already signed on my end. The property is divided according to our prenuptial terms. At that moment, Julia's expression shifted completely. The pained look vanished, replaced by a flash of triumph in her eyes. A moment ago she was sobbing on the floor, and now she looked perfectly fine. Gavin suddenly shook her hand off and strode toward me, disbelief written all over his face. Ruby, you cannot divorce me. And why not? I asked, arching a brow. You are holding another woman in your arms, right in front of me. And now you say we cannot get divorced. I told you, he insisted. Julia and I are only colleagues. There is nothing more between us. Gavin, I said calmly. I do not care what the truth is between you and Julia. All I know is, you made your choice, and it was not me. There is no reason for us to continue. I looked him straight in the eye and spoke slowly, clearly. Gavin, do you remember when we first got married? I told you something very clearly. I hate it when people touch my things. And you crossed that line, again and again. I gave you so many chances. How many did you actually cherish? When something is dirty, you throw it out. People are no different. I held his gaze without blinking. Gavin, I do not want you anymore. His face went ashen. I picked up the divorce papers and held them out to him. The assets are divided fairly, just as we agreed before marriage. Gavin did not take them. Ruby, he said, his voice tight with desperation, I will not sign. You are just acting out of anger right now. At that moment, my father stood up and addressed them calmly. Mr. Porter, if both parties can proceed with a peaceful divorce, we may still discuss future collaborations, but if not, Then all negotiations are off the table. The Porter Group was already struggling to stay afloat. If this partnership fell apart, the losses would be catastrophic. Mr. Porter Sr. remained silent for a few tense seconds. Then, with a scowl, he shot a sharp glare at Gavin. Sign it. Under pressure from his parents, Gavin finally picked up the pen and signed the divorce papers. Just like that, Gavin and I were officially divorced. Julia stood off to the side, barely concealing the smug satisfaction in her eyes. I met her gaze and offered a faint smile. Congratulations, Julia, you got exactly what you wanted. That one sentence was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. You shameless girl. Mrs. Porter suddenly exploded, her voice rising to a shriek. She grabbed Julia by the hair, her hands shaking with fury. This is all your fault. I signaled to the butler nearby. Show them out. At that moment, our housekeeper stepped into the room, holding a steaming bowl in her hands. Miss Ruby, your herbal tonic is ready. You should drink it while it is still warm. Everyone from the Porter family froze. Ruby, you are pregnant. Gavin's voice cracked, barely recognizable. I took the bowl, drank it in one long sip, then turned to look at him. Last month, I said quietly, the day you hit me at the hospital, I had come to tell you this happy news. But you would not even let me finish a sentence. Gavin's lips trembled, he could not find any words. From that day on, I continued, my voice steady, you lost the right to be this child's father, forever. My father's face darkened the moment he heard those words. What did you say? He hit you. Before anyone could react, he crossed the room in 3 large strides and landed a punch squarely on Gavin's face. Gavin stumbled back, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. He did not fight back. You animal, my father roared. You hit my daughter, while she was carrying your child. Gavin stood there, dazed, blooded, and broken. His eyes stayed fixed on me, filled with pain and regret. Ruby. He whispered my name, his voice pleading. Just give me one more chance. Please, just one. A chance, I asked coldly, a bitter smile touching my lips. I gave you more than one chance. Gavin, remember. Gavin crumpled to his knees, his spirit finally breaking. Send them out, I instructed the butler. Without hesitation, the butler turned and motioned for the Porters to leave. Mr. Porter pulled his devastated son up from the floor. Mrs. Porter dragged Julia toward the door. Still gripping her hair in fury, the Porter Group eventually survived the threat of bankruptcy, but the damage from the divorce was irreversible. In just a few weeks, the company's stock plummeted by nearly 40%, several key partners withdrew from ongoing projects, and over a dozen major investors pulled out entirely. Gavin was no longer the powerful, decisive CEO he had once been. He spent his days locked inside the villa, surrounded by empty bottles. Alcohol became his only escape. And he was sober for only fleeting moments. Julia refused to give up the position she had fought so hard for. Every day, she showed up at the villa, determined to take care of Gavin. She cleaned the house, made hangover remedies, and when he passed out from drinking, she would quietly wipe his face and hands. Mr. Porter, she said softly, holding out a glass of water, please drink something. Gavin lifted his bloodshot eyes, his gaze focused for a brief second, then drifted again into confusion. Sia, is that you? Have you come back? He raised a trembling hand and gently touched Julia's cheek. Julia stood frozen. This was the 17th time. 17 times Gavin had mistaken her for the woman who was long gone, the one who had once been his everything. I am not Sia, she said softly, trying to steady her voice. I am Julia. Julia. She bit down hard on the ache in her chest, gently reminding him of who she really was, but Gavin acted as if he had not heard her at all. He sat there, speaking dreamily to someone who was not even there. Sia, now that you are back, please do not leave again. That is enough. Julia suddenly screamed. The water glass in her hand slammed to the floor, shattering into pieces. The crash echoed through the room. Gavin blinked in surprise, startled by the sound. His eyes turned toward her, confused. I really am such a fool, Julia whispered, her voice trembling. How did I fall in love with someone like you? A man who can only ever see me as someone else. Her chest heaved as she let the words tumble out, every sentence heavy with pain. You deserve this, all of it. You have no one to blame but yourself." Her long-suppressed resentment burst forth like a dam breaking. The bitterness and jealousy she had hidden for so long could no longer be contained. "You had a wife and you did not cherish her. Now look at you, left with nothing, and still clinging to the memory of your so-called perfect woman." Gavin's eyes turned sharp, the haze of alcohol lifting in an instant. For the first time in days, he was completely sober. "Julia," he said coldly, "you are not allowed to speak about her that way. Get out, leave now." Julia laughed, the sound hollow and cutting. "You are still defending her. Gavin, do you even know she is not dead?" His body stiffened. What are you saying?" "You heard me," Julia snapped. "She is alive. She faked her death after taking 50 million from your parents. That was her final act of love. She even left a note, asking you to support her worthless boyfriend's company. That was your great love." Her voice rose into a frenzy, all the rage and humiliation boiling over. Without warning, Gavin lunged at her, his hand clamping around her throat, pushing her hard against the wall. "Shut up," she gasped, struggling, her face turning pale. After a moment, he let go. Julia collapsed onto the floor, coughing and gasping for breath. "How do you think I knew all those little details between you and her?" she rasped. "It was her. She came to me. She said having you help her boyfriend was not enough. She wanted more. So she helped me take your trust, your resources, everything." Gavin's face turned ghostly white. He staggered back a step, shaking. "No, Sia. She would never. Julia's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Why don't you call your parents and ask them yourself? Ask them if they gave Sia 50 million. Gavin shakily dialed the number. The call was short, but the silence from the other end, the hesitation, was enough to tell him everything he needed to know. When his father finally spoke, the words were weak, half-hearted, and too late. Gavin slumped to the floor, the phone slipping from his fingers. Because of you, you two venomous women, I hurt Ruby," he muttered brokenly, his voice no longer even recognizable. Julia stared down at him, then burst into laughter. "Gavin," she said, her voice full of mockery, "do not blame anyone else. You were the one who pushed away the woman who loved you the most." Gavin suddenly looked up, his face twisted in rage. "Get out," he roared, "and never let me see you again." When Gavin returned to the company, he immediately called for an emergency board meeting. Without hesitation, he cut ties with several problematic partners. 3 days later, the once celebrated Jiaheng Technologies declared bankruptcy. Its founder, Jiaheng Huang, was taken into custody by authorities on suspicion of financial fraud. That company had been founded by Sia's boyfriend, and all along, it was Gavin who had been quietly supporting it behind the scenes. Around the same time, Julia received a text message from an unknown number. "I know it was you who betrayed me." As night fell, Julia quickened her pace on her way home. She kept glancing over her shoulder, haunted by the sense that someone was following her. She turned into a narrow alley, trying to take a shortcut. The next morning, the front page of the local paper reported chilling news. 2 female bodies were found in a dark alley. Police suspected they had killed each other during a violent struggle. Gavin stared at the paper in silence, his eyes falling on the names of the deceased. Julia, Sia. Time passed swiftly. Our daughter, Peyton West, was nearly a year old. Her little round face was absolutely adorable. She had my eyes and Gavin's nose every time I watched her sleeping peacefully. I could not help but kiss her soft little cheeks. We named her Peyton, hoping she would grow up safe, joyful, and free from worries. "Mom, Peyton learned a new word today," I said excitedly, holding my daughter in my arms as my mother returned from the garden. Smiling, my mother set down her gardening scissors and reached out for Peyton, her face lit up with pride. "Our little Peyton is so clever. Come on now, say Grandma." Grandma Tilda, Peyton said in her sweet, soft voice, making my mother laugh with delight. Since retiring, my parents had handed the family business over to me. Their greatest joy each day was spending time with their granddaughter. Gavin came by many times over the months, even kneeling and begging me to take him back, but I refused, every time. Some wounds leave scars too deep for apologies to heal. "Ruby," my father said one afternoon. "Mr. Porter called again." I shook my head calmly. "Dad, the rule stands, until Peyton turns 3. They are not allowed to visit. 3 years passed quickly. Peyton grew into a bright and spirited little girl. She was stubborn and strong-willed, just like me. When she finally met Gavin's parents for the first time, she greeted them sweetly. Grandpa, Grandma. The elderly couple were so moved they could not hold back their tears. Gavin stood nearby, eyes full of hope. "Peyton, I am your dad," he said gently. Peyton tilted her head, studying him with her big, curious eyes. "Mom said that when someone does something wrong, they have to face the consequences," she said seriously. "You made Mom sad, so I cannot call you Dad." The room fell silent. Gavin knelt down to meet her at eye level. "Daddy knows he was wrong," he said softly. "Daddy regrets it more than anything." "Regret does not fix it," Peyton replied, her voice innocent yet firm. "Mom said once something happens, you cannot undo it. There is no medicine for regret." Gavin looked up at me, eyes filled with sorrow and remorse. I gave him a faint smile, but said nothing. There was a time when he could have had a perfect family, but he shattered that chance with his own hands. Now, I had a thriving career, loving parents, and the most precious daughter anyone could ask for. My life was full and beautiful. No one is essential to someone else's happiness. Gavin now came by every day to see Peyton, and each time he left, he would stand in the yard for a long moment, quietly watching us through the living room window. I knew what he was thinking. If only he could turn back time, he would have made a different choice. But life does not give us a second chance. We all must live with the paths we choose, and as for me, I no longer needed his apologies. I no longer needed anyone's guilt. Thank you for watching today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so feel free to share your opinions. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more great stories. We'll see you in the next video.